What if the skills your great-grandmother used every single day were later reclassified as public health hazards? Not because they caused harm, but because an industry needed her to stop doing them and start buying something instead. That's not a theory. That's a documented pattern, and it played out across 14 different areas of rural American life inside of one generation. This video names all 14. It names the mechanism behind each one. And it ends with something you can actually do this week on your own property. Number 1, hand-dug wells for independent water access. Your great-grandfather picked up a shovel, hit water at 30 feet, and drank from that hole in the ground for the rest of his life. No permit. No licensed driller. No monthly bill. That same act today gets you a cease and desist before the bucket comes back up wet. Hand-dug wells worked. The testing method was simple. Watch the animals drink first, check the smell, check the color, watch your family. Not perfect, but free and theirs entirely. Number 2, rainwater collection and storage systems. In 2012, a man in Oregon named Gary Harrington went to jail for 30 days and paid over $1,500 in fines for catching rain on his own property. He'd built 3 ponds. The state told him the rain belonged to downstream users who held senior water rights under prior appropriation doctrine, which is the legal framework that treats water as a property right tied to whoever claimed it first. Your grandmother's cistern caught roof runoff for laundry, livestock, and the kitchen garden. Nobody called it theft because it was rain falling on her roof. Number 3, root cellars for food preservation. Your grandmother dug 4 feet down, lined the walls, hung a heavy door, and cut a ventilation gap at the top. Potatoes stayed firm through April. Carrots came out crisp in February. Apples lasted into March. No electricity, no refrigerant, no bill, because the earth below the frost line holds between 32 and 40 degrees Fahrenheit year-round without any help from you. The Rural Electrification Act of 1936 ran power lines to rural America, and GE, Frigidaire, and Westinghouse moved in right behind it. Their ads in the late 1930s and 1940s called the root cellar unsanitary and linked it to poverty. The electric refrigerator got sold as modern and clean and American. Number 4, wood-burning stoves for heat and cooking. Natural gas utility companies pushed into rural markets hard after World War II, and the appliance industry followed. The EPA's 1988 regulations under the Clean Air Act banned the sale of older, simpler stoves outright. The 2015 updates to the New Source Performance Standards tightened things further, requiring catalytic combustors and secondary burn systems that need maintenance, replacement parts, and proprietary components. Oregon's DEQ can now declare curtailment days that ban wood stove use entirely, even if it's your only heat source. Number 5, smokehouses for preserving meat. In 1967, a farm family in rural Virginia could slaughter a hog, smoke it, and sell it to their neighbors without a single federal inspector ever setting foot on the property. By 1972, that same act was a federal violation. The farm didn't change. The Wholesome Meat Act of 1967 did. Smoking meat works because salt, heat, smoke, and low humidity together create conditions where pathogenic bacteria can't survive. Your grandfather knew this the way he knew when the first frost was coming, through practice, through generations of it working. Number 6, home canning and food preservation. Your grandmother's pantry held 200 jars by October. Green beans, corn, venison, peaches, tomatoes. She put them up in a kitchen with no commercial cert, no pH meter, no written food safety plan. Her family ate from those jars all winter and nobody got hurt because she knew what she was doing. The Food Safety Modernization Act of 2011 changed the math for anyone who wanted to sell that food. The preventive controls rules require written hazard plans, supplier verification programs, and facility registration. Compliance runs $5,000 to $15,000 in upgrades before you sell a single jar. That's not a safety standard. It's a barrier calibrated for a facility running 10,000 jars a day, not a woman at a farmer's market. Number 7, solar exposure and passive heating before modern solar systems. In 1938, a farmer in southern Ohio built his house with the long wall facing south, tall windows on that side, small ones on the north, and a roof overhang calculated to block the high summer sun and let the low winter sun pour straight onto the floor. He didn't call it passive solar design. He called it not being stupid about it. Every farmhouse builder before World War II knew this. Orientation cost nothing and cut your heating needs in half, so they all did it. Then Leavitt-town happened. The 1950s and 1960s suburban model-oriented houses to the street grid, not the sun, because streets were cheaper to lay out than solar geometry was to calculate. Millions of homes went up with no relationship to the sun at all, and every single one needed a furnace. Number 8. Gravity-fed water systems from springs and streams. A spring sitting 100 feet above your house is a pressurized water system. Every 2.31 feet of elevation drop creates 1 psi of pressure at the tap, so that spring delivers about 43 pounds per square inch, with 0 pumps, 0 electricity, and 0 monthly bill. Families across Appalachia and the Ozarks ran these systems for generations because the physics don't need a utility company behind them. A spring box, which is just a concrete or stone chamber set into the hillside where the water comes out of the ground, catches the water before it touches surface soil, keeps debris out, and feeds a pipe straight downhill to the house. Number 9. Seed saving for long-term food security. Your grandfather walked the garden in August with a paper bag, pinching the best tomatoes before they fully ripened, letting them finish on the windowsill, then squeezing the seeds into a jar of water to ferment for 3 days before rinsing and drying them on a screen. That variety had been in the family longer than the farm itself. The Plant Variety Protection Act of 1970 started turning seeds into property. The Bayh-Dole Act of 1980 let universities patent publicly funded breeding research, and by the time Monsanto's Roundup Ready soybean patents held up in court in the 1990s, saving seed from a patented crop wasn't just discouraged, it was legally actionable. Number 10. Hunting, trapping, and fishing for supplemental food. In 1900, your great-grandfather walked into the woods when the family needed meat and came back with it. No license, no season dates, no federal stamp. The skill was his, the game was there, and the transaction cost nothing. The conservation movement that followed was legitimate. Market hunters had gutted wild populations, and the licensing system that Roosevelt and the Boone and Crockett Club pushed for actually worked. The game came back. That's the genuine win. Number 11. Using draft animals instead of fuel-powered equipment. 2 Percherons could plow, plant, cultivate, and harvest a 40-acre farm for 20 years straight, and when they were done, they produced the next generation of themselves. A tractor does none of that. The USDA's 1920 census counted over 25 million horses and mules on American farms. By 1960, fewer than 3 million remained. That didn't happen by accident. The Farm Security Administration offered equipment loans for tractors and nothing comparable for draft animals, so farmers who couldn't afford to buy outright got pushed toward the machine anyway. Number 12. Repairing tools and machinery instead of replacing them. A cast iron hand pump from 1910 breaks down to 1 worn leather cup washer. 40 cents, 20 minutes. Your great-grandfather knew that the way he knew which field needed lime, because fixing what you owned wasn't a specialty, it was just competence. In 1954, industrial designer Brooks Stevens put a name to what replaced that culture. He called it instilling in the buyer the desire to own something a little newer, a little better, a little sooner than is necessary. That sentence became the product design philosophy of post-war American manufacturing, and it worked by making parts proprietary and repair processes impossible without tools you didn't own. Number 13. Living from large pantry stores and preserved foods. Your grandmother didn't shop in January. She walked to the pantry shelf, pulled a jar of green beans she'd put up in September, and cooked dinner. Lard, dried beans, salt pork, canned tomatoes, and dried corn carried a rural family from October to June without a single grocery run. That wasn't prepping. It was just how households worked before the supermarket model convinced everyone that 3 days of inventory on a store shelf was someone else's problem to manage. Number 14. Neighbor-to-neighbor mutual aid networks for supplies and labor. In 1935, a barn burned down in rural Kansas on a Thursday night. By Saturday morning, the neighbors showed up with lumber, tools, and enough food to feed 20 people through a full day of work. The barn stood before Sunday. Nobody sent an invoice. Nobody tracked hours. The whole system ran on one shared understanding. When your barn burns, we show up, because someday ours will too. That's not charity. It's a distributed insurance network with 0 administrative overhead, and it worked because everyone lived close enough to know exactly what everyone else needed. None of these 14 skills were primitive. They were a complete system. A family that practiced all of them owed nothing to a utility company, nothing to a grocery chain, nothing to a seed company, and nothing to an equipment dealer. That independence took generations to build and 1 generation to discard.